I remember the sound of my own breath echoing off the narrow walls of my studio apartment. Every shallow exhale, every heartbeat felt like it bounced back at me louder than it should have, louder than what made sense. And maybe that was the first sign that something was wrong. The apartment was so small that even the shadows seemed to pile up on top of each other, crammed into corners that had no business, holding anything. The ceiling sagged slightly in the middle, a soft curve that always reminded me of a frown, and the floor was always cold, always gritty, no matter how many times I swept it. I was 23, alone and just barely holding it together. The apartment sat on the third floor of a crumbling brick building, wedged between a boarded-up laundromat and a tattoo shop that never seemed to open. I had taken it because it was cheap, and the landlord did not ask too many questions. That alley behind the building was always damp, always dark. A tight little corridor of forgotten light, wedged between my building and another, just like it. Even in summer, the air back there felt stale, as though nothing had moved through it in years, not even time. From my window, I could see straight into the apartment across the alley. It was maybe 6 feet away, close enough to reach. If I had a long enough stick, close enough to hear someone whisper if the windows were open. But they never were. The apartment across had been dark since the day I moved in. Curtains always drawn, lights always off. It was supposed to be vacant. The landlord said it was empty, but I never quite believed him. Because some nights late after I returned from my shift at the lounge, I would see things. Just movement. Nothing clear. Just a twitch of fabric, or a flicker of something behind the curtain, like fingers curling away. Just as I looked up, I would stop on the threshold of my own door, keys hanging in the lock, my breath caught in my throat, eyes locked on that strip of window, just waiting, and then nothing. Every time I would tell myself it was my imagination, maybe a draft, maybe headlights from a car that should not have been there. Maybe the light inside playing tricks on my tired eyes. But the feeling would not go away, that heavy cold knot in my chest that said someone was staring back, someone who never blinked, someone who never slept, someone who waited. Then one night it was different. I had been running late. The bar was packed, a Friday crowd, and the regulars were rowdy, louder than usual, meaner than usual. I did not get home until almost 4, and when I stepped into the alley, I froze. There was light, a faint, soft glow, like the warm flicker of an old lamp. It bled around the edges of the curtain across from me, dull gold, spilling into that grimy alley like it had no right to. My heart stuttered. I remember that because the silence that followed was so loud. It was like the whole world had gone still, just to hear me panic. I stared for a long time, the keys biting into my palm, but I did not move. The curtain moved again, slower this time, more deliberately, like someone was taking their time, like they wanted me to see them, and I did not. Clearly not a full face, just a shape behind the curtain, just the impression of someone standing there still and tall and wrong. I ran upstairs, locked my door, bolted it, then sat in the middle of my floor, with all the lights off, just listening for something I could not name. The next morning I convinced myself it was a dream, maybe a nightmare brought on by too much stress, too little sleep, too much caffeine, but I avoided the window all the same, kept the blinds closed, pretended it was not there. But the feeling never left, the sense that I was being watched, that someone across the way was waiting for me to let my guard down, to open the window, to look up at the wrong moment. Then came the first note, folded into the crack of my door, dirty and crumpled like it had been stepped on or dropped into something wet. It was just a scrap of paper, and on it one word written in blue ink. Hey. That was it. Just hey, and it was enough to send ice down my spine. Because no one should have been able to get into the building at that hour. No one knew where I lived. No one had any reason to say hello. I turned toward the window. The curtain across the alley was still drawn, but I felt it. I felt that presence, that quiet, terrible weight of someone watching, waiting, knowing. Part 2. I stood in the center of that room, clutching the note like it might burn through my fingers. And all the while I kept my eyes on the window across the alley, as if whatever was behind it could leap through the glass and take me if I looked away. I did not sleep that night. I sat with my back against the wall, knees tucked close, and the note lying on the floor in front of me, like some ancient warning, and every few minutes my eyes would flick back to in the window, but it remained unchanged. Curtains still drawn, no light, no movement. But I knew someone had been in the building. Someone had come all the way to my door and slipped that paper inside without a sound. And that kind of silence only comes from someone who has done it before, someone who knows exactly how quiet they need to be. The next day I did not go to work. I told them I was sick, which was true in a way, just not the kind of sick they meant. My head was pounding my stomach, a mess, and my hands could not stop shaking. I stared at the walls for hours, counting the cracks in the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the buzz of the hallway, light through the door, the silence from across the alley, until dusk came and the curtain moved again. I had not turned the lights on. I had not made a sound, and still it moved just the slightest shift, as though someone was brushing their fingertips across it from behind, testing it, like they were reminding me that they were still there. He did not move. He did not breathe. I just sat there in the dark, counting every slow beat of my heart. And when the curtain stilled and nothing else happened, I finally crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The next few days, blurred together, I stopped, leaving the apartment. I lived off ramen and canned soup, kept my phone beside me at all times, though I did not call anyone, not yet, because part of me still hoped it would stop, that maybe whoever was over there would get bored and move on. But they did not, and then the second note came. This time, it was under the door waiting for me. When I got back from throwing out the trash, the paper was even more crumpled, like it had been crushed in a fist, and the ink was smeared, as if written with a shaking hand. You look scared. That was all it said. You looked scared. I dropped it like it was poison, like it might bite me. Then I kicked it into the corner of the room and turned every single light on in the apartment, even the ones in the bathroom, even the flashlight on my phone. I called. My friend Jamie, told her I needed to stay at her place, told her I was being watched, told her something was wrong. She believed me. Maybe it was the way my voice cracked, or the fact that I had never asked her for help before. Maybe she heard the fear. Maybe she had always known something was not right with the building. Either way, she told me to come over. I packed a bag fast. Too fast, I forgot things. But I did not care. I needed out. As I was leaving, I looked across the alley one last time. The curtain was drawn, but I could feel it, feel the stare, feel the pressure of invisible eyes digging through the glass. And then the curtain moved again. Not just a twitch. This time it opened a little, just a few inches, and I saw it a face, or the idea of a face, pale and colorless, like wax, like stretched paper eyes, too wide mouth, not smiling but pulled like it wanted to be, but forgot how. I screamed. I could not help it. I screamed and slammed the door and ran down the stairs without looking back. Jamie, let me stay with her. No questions asked. She made tea and gave me blankets, and I sat on her couch shaking for what felt like hours. The next morning I went back with the landlord to look at the apartment across the alley. He was annoyed. He muttered about overreactions, but I did not care. I needed to see it with my own eyes. He unlocked the door, and it swung open slow, like something heavy was leaning on the other side, and inside was nothing. No furniture, no carpet, no signs of life, except dust and air that smelled like rot. And then we saw it. A single folding chair, placed perfectly in front of the window facing my apartment. The legs left small indentations in the wood, where they had sat unmoving for who knows how long. And on the seat of the chair was a scrap of fabric, pale and soft, a piece of curtain. The landlord turned pale, said he had no idea how it got there, said he had not rented the place in months. We called the police. They searched, took pictures, asked questions, but nothing came of it. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, no proof that anyone had been living there. But they had. I knew it. The chair was proof. The notes were proof. That face was proof. I moved out within the week. Jamie helped me find another place on the other side of the city somewhere, with lots of people and no alleys and curtains that I never open. But it did not end. Because sometimes in the middle of the night, I wake up cold, drenched in sweat, with the feeling that someone is standing just outside the window, even when there is no window in the room. And sometimes I find little notes in places. I know I did not leave them behind the couch, inside kitchen drawers under my pillow. Just little words. Hello soon. Remember me. Part 3. The last note I found was inside my coat pocket. A coat I had not worn since moving out, and when I reached inside looking for my gloves, it was there waiting, like it had always been. There, like it had followed me. Across the city, across time, across logic. It said, "I missed your window." I stared at it for hours. Just sat in the dark room, with that paper clutched in my hand, and the walls felt closer than they should have. The air heavier, like it was listening, like it was holding its breath with me. I burned the note in the sink, watched it curl and blacken and vanish into smoke, and still, that feeling stayed. That quiet whisper of eyes on my skin from some direction I could never find. I stopped telling people. They started to look at me differently. Tilted heads, furrowed brows, soft, careful voices. Maybe you need rest. Maybe it was stress. Maybe talk to someone. I tried to believe them. I really did. I forced myself to walk outside more, to sit in crowded coffee shops and pretend the world was normal again. But no matter where I went, there was always that feeling. Always that cold. Always that pressure. Like something was stretching thin walls between worlds just to keep watching. One night I stayed at Jamie's again, too nervous to be alone. She fell asleep on the couch, her mouth slightly open, the television muttering nonsense to itself in the corner. I was halfway to sleep when I felt the shift, a subtle drop in air pressure, a silence that swallowed the television sound without muting it. I sat up, heart pounding, and turned slowly toward the window. And there it was. Not outside, not behind the glass, but reflected in it. Standing behind me in the room, impossibly tall face, still that same pale idea of a smile, hands hanging too still, too straight. I turned around fast. Nothing there, but I could still see it in the glass. Closer now, closer still. I grabbed my keys, ran down the stairs, left the apartment barefoot and breathless, walked until my legs gave out and I had to sit on a curb somewhere unfamiliar under a flickering streetlight with my breath fogging in front of me, even though it was not that cold. I do not remember how I got home. The next morning, Jamie called, said she woke up alone, said the door was wide open, said my coat was still there, but I was not, and she was scared. I tried to tell her I was fine. I tried tea.